What's up, troop? It's Unders, and today we're going to break down the project for my new female-fronted vocal DnB track, which sounds like this. So I wrote and produced all of this track in Logic, and we're going to open up the session and just break down all the different parts and look at how it was made. Let's get into it. Thanks to the channel sponsor DistroKid. DistroKid is a music distribution service and the best way to get your music out to all of the modern streaming services fast, efficiently, and within an independent artist's budget. Check out the description below for a discount today. All right, so here is the Logic session, and I'll just break down what we're looking at real quick. So first off, these are all the channels. There's what, 46 on here, but 2 of them are buses. So what, we've got 44 actual channels of thing going on. This, everything highlighted over here on the left hand side, is the end project. I, in my projects, tend to have ideas and other ways I want to arrange it, or maybe different melodies and things. I stick all of those over on the right hand side, and what you end up with is kind of a graveyard of scrapped ideas and scrapped arrangements. As you can see, it looks like the full track and there's lots going on, but it's just different, and this looks more uniform and finished, and this will be my finished track, and here's my graveyard of other ideas. That's why there's always those in there. Like, we've got this whole melody lead vocal section over here that's never been used and isn't in the final. And that's just a way I find really useful to work, just having essentially everything over on the right hand side is like scrapped ideas or ideas maybe to use later, and I can bring them back over rather than deleting them. They just sit there in the graveyard. So let's break down how everything starts here. What we actually start with is a sample and then some editing going into the vocal. So let's grab the first couple of bars just here, and it tips just a little bit past bar 1, just so I've got a little bit of a lead in, and I've just got this pad sample is the first thing we hear. That just helps us lead in with this first bit of vocal that comes in here with it. That just establishes the tune and that it's going to have that female vocal. And then, boom, the chords just on that keyword there. And then there's these little harmony bits in the bottom here. I do lots of little vocal effects and layers. They're super subtle in here, look, but they're just adding a little bit in the background. So if we have a listen to them. Yeah, and they are just coming in with the chords here. And they're just kind of harmonizing with it and establishing that vocal presence under the chord. Yeah. When you listen to it before, you probably didn't even notice they were there, but it all builds in together. So we've established those 3 elements. I've got that kind of like backing vocal thing going on, the actual vocal, the sample, and the chords. We've got those main elements established, and we move into the next section where we just continue that theme. We're further in the story, new sound, sweeping in. So we've done 16 bars establishing the kind of sounds that are going to be in the track. Now I had a little play around in this track, and there's then another 16 bars that mess us around a bit. I kind of give like a false impression it's about to start and then wind it back. And it's part of the narrative of the track and some of the effects that go on, which we'll have a look at now. So listen to these 16 bars. Right, so what's going on here? We're establishing that there's going to be some rhythm coming in. We've got bits of the drums starting to come in now. We've just established those. So if we grab the drum bus, we've got all these parts. And there's an extra shaker in there just for a bit of... I don't really use that anywhere else. It's just there for a bit of rhythm at the start. Got a really, really high pass kick. I just want to give like the heartbeat kind of feel. And it falsely leads us up into thinking, you know, the track's about to start. And then there's our full start. So I've taken the arpeggio away, and we've done some effects on the chords which give us the false start. And again, it's part of the narrative of the track, that false start, that not quite moving forward, right? Yeah, and you hear it in the lyrics, I've been stuck in circles all the time, can't quite get started, that sort of thing. That's why it's got that false start in there. I just liked that little bit of narrative telling. Now we're establishing more of what's going to be in the main drop. So some of the drum breaks are coming in. I've got, I've bounced out this snare line here. It says BC snare. It was probably made from originally a BC snare. It's a bunch of layers that were giving me phasing issues, so I've bounced them out. So we've got this massive long bit of snare sample, but it's done the job for us. That's establishing, the main break's establishing. Just in that last, literally quarter of a bar, right? We're just establishing we're about to go. And then everything moves into the drop. Now, if you've looked at my breakdowns previously, I often just have 1 or 2 vocal tracks. People have asked before, like, how I go about the whole vocal process. So in this case, I've not summed them together. I usually mix the vocal, bounce it out into an audio track, because they're pretty heavy on mixing and automation. Here we can really see everything that's going on and how I've done it and who, what, where, why, when, and how. So let's have a little look at what we're doing. We've got an establishing vocal, right? We'll use this little section here when you look at these 3 parts. So we've got our main vocal line, it's this top one here. And processing wise, loads going on. We'll dive into that in a sec. I just need a spark. Right, so I've got main vocal, that's the one that sits on top and leads everything. And without everything else, it still sounds great. It's on there nicely, right? And then we've got a couple of layers. I just need a spark. What they're doing is just rounding it out, giving the feeling like it's all around you. There's some different tonality going on as well. And processing wise, they're a little bit less. They haven't needed as much. But the main vocal is the one that's got loads of processing. So let's have a little breakdown of what that processing is along the main line. We use the longer section just here. Something in the way I used to move. So first thing is gain. I've put the gain control on there. The vocal was recorded quite loud, and that just means I'm fighting all the time. Now I can gain it down over here in the inspector, and it looks like I might have done that, but I then can't automate it later. So if I use the utility gain, I've dropped it back -6.2 dB, I can automate that, and I can change the levels as need be without adjusting the fader, which adjusts the overall mix. If you want to know more about that process, I will link a resource below explaining why I do it that way and why it works. Then we've got DS, there's lots of because we've got sparks, stars, etc. in here. So DS are on there doing lots of control for us, look. There's loads of S's, needed control it nice and early, then we're not bringing them up with the EQ or anything like that. And yeah, it's taking down, I think at times as much as 8 dB on those S's, really controlling them, but they still stick out in the mix. Haven't overdone it, but control them early in that kind of case. Sometimes you EQ and then you just want to control that area because it's just bringing the odd one up here and there. There's loads in this, control them early and get them all squared away. We've then got a noise gate. Essentially there was some background noise of audio, bit of a noise floor and breathing. Noise gate just negates a whole bunch of that, and then there's still editing to do afterwards, but that's why the noise gate's there. It's a noise gate, it gets rid of quiet stuff in the background, is what it is. We then got pitch correction. I still use the default Logic one. I think it does a perfectly fine job. I think I've got auto tune and yet I still use that. I've definitely got waves tune. Again, just tuned into the track on the minor scale. It's not customized, it's just been set to a nice response time with the track. It's not working particularly hard, it's just catching the longer notes that might wobble. Then we've got my one that does the most work at all times, Cla Vocals. I've covered it at least 3 times on the channel in depth. Want to learn more about it? Again, I'll link that below as well for you. It's just doing a whole bunch. It adds a little profile, it's lifting up the lower tones, it's adding some stereo spread. Yeah, there it is without it. It just does so much heavy lifting. Such a good vocal plugin. And then right at the end, we've got Pro Q. Now let's just getting rid of some low end rumble we didn't need. And we talked about those S's before. Even after all the processing, I'm still having to control 2 of them individually, and you'll see them here. And that's still nailing them down another 10 dB. So in some instances, I'm taking 18 dB of audio out of this vocal, yet the S's are still prominent. And in context of the whole track, notice though, I haven't actually EQ'd the vocal anywhere apart from taking out here that de-essing. It sounded good as is, didn't need to destroy it. I've only taken things away to rebalance it. It then goes into a vocal bus. On here, I've got the de-esser again, just catching any extras. I've then got FabFilter Saturn doing some distortion in the middle, and that's adding a lot of that aggression into the middle here. Put that way. Bet you didn't think you'd see that. LA2A, just catching the whole bus, just gluing it together a bit. Only a couple of dB of compression, look. And now we've got Pro Q, catching those extreme S's again, pulling them down even further, another 6 dB. And we've got a little bit of lift counterbalance in here. This really comes into its own later. It lifts up and holds it in the mix a bit more. Alright, so that's a breakdown of how the vocals are working and all the layers that go with them. You know, we can have all of those together. They're like this. So lots of work goes into them and they sound great. There's different layers going on as well. So this one here, for example, is down here on its own. It just needed different processing to stand out in that area, and that's why it's down there on its own. It's had its own little bit of treatment, so it gets its own space. Different gain, there's no gain coming down, and that is probably automated, and a different CLA vocal setup. It's just got its own space. It's going to a different bus. Yeah, different feeling, different bit of the track. And that happens as well here, audio 19. When we move into the main section, the main vocal has its own processing, even though it's still part of the main vocal. That's why they're just below each other. Let's move into the drop, and now all our drums are engaged. We've got loads of drum channels, and of course, let's break those down. Yeah, okay, so Drum Lab, Native Instruments, we've just built this out. Sounds like Hey Mickey, right? Processing wise, again, just a roll off. Taking the low end out, I don't need that, I'm using that later with the main kick drum, and some pretty heavy compression as well. Could have done that in the plugin, preferred what I was doing there. That's it, nothing really complex, just using Drum Lab there. Here's our kick. Proper airy hook kick, but it does all the weight that I need. Now we've got an actual SoCal kit, just doing some ride and top end for us. That will just be a default Logic one. And again, with the EQ, just taking out everything we don't need, look. There's obviously something there that I didn't like, boosted up the top end. Literally that's all that's doing. We've got my snares that I just routed to audio because they were messing me around, but another snare layer. Yep. Shuffly break. Probably another shuffly break. I can hardly hear what that one adds, to be honest. Just that. And that is essentially our drum break all built in there. Just loads of shuffling, got that nice ride tinkling up there. Lots of high end to work with, kick all on its own, just does the job nicely. You know, if we take away, say, the Hey Mickey break, feels a bit empty, so I like that natural break sound in there. And if we take away the SoCal kit, just a bit old school and boring, right? I like the shine of a really like nice shiny bit of kit in there, and then juxtaposed with all the other sounds, it all just works together quite nicely. Processing wise, nothing massive going on with the drums particularly. You know, bit of EQ, the odd lift, a little bit of compression. The kick's probably the most notable thing. I use my R-bass trick where I've got it generating an extra sine wave at 98, so it sounds considerably different. Completely different kick drum, isn't it? But put it back in, and it just gives me that weight. Just a trick that I love to use. Gives me what I want. And we've got this guy here. These at the minute are all frozen because this is a hench track session, but it's just the ARP from the chords before, and it lays with this. Then we've got some staccato strings. A lead line that doesn't come in until right at the end because everything builds up. Just made that in Monarch. I use that all the time. It's just a Moog. Just this guy here. I tend to just make the patch as I go along. Use the NKS keyboard. I can just tweak it as I go and build that up. Effects wise, yeah, there's a fair bit going on. Saturn again, doing loads of processing here, look. Just saturation in different places, just to boost it up a little bit. Some EQ, loads of EQ and control going on, taking out all of this around the 500 that wasn't nice. API compression, doing loads of compression, like proper control in it, so it stays in that exact spot in the mix that I want it in. There's then another compressor afterwards, that is purely sidechain. So that's sidechain to the kick, just knocks it back when the kick comes in to knock it out of the way. Then got submarine, adding some sub to it, take submarine away, listen. If you got a good set of headphones on, you'll just notice all the extra weight at the bottom. And then we've got Neutron 3, doing even more processing on the end here. They've got another exciter, giving it more distortion. EQ, again, controlling around 600 hertz here. Then we've got compression, as you can see, again, linked up to, I think the snare in this instance. Yeah, linked up to the snare, so it's moving out of the way of the snare drum as well. So kick pulls it back and snare pulls it back. The snare's really, really quick, just to give it some punch through. And then, this secret, this is the lead line that goes behind the vocal, just to give the vocal loads of cutting through presence. So the idea of that is it works with the vocal, all right? This guy here, we just use this towards the end of this part just to add a little bit of a build up, and you know, we're signifying we're going to transition shortly. It's just in there, just a little bit of candy. This as well, this will just be a sweep that we've made that does a similar kind of job. Just signifying we're coming to the end. And then this is going to be an even shorter one. And they all just build together to just ramp up over time and end it. Basically all the vocal layers that make up the main section just sitting together. Alright, so all of those elements come together and give us our drop, which goes like this. Now, sticking with the false start narrative of like, I've got no support, there's nothing going on. It's a really short 16-bar drop, and it drops back out into the all alone. And we're using all of the same elements now, but we've established one kind of new sound, which is this. So that little pulsing, it's not quite the arpeggio, you know, it's just a new kind of presence in the track. And that remains for the rest of the track, right? And we're starting to build up again now, and we're going to build up into a big like finale. We've got like a huge finale that just builds up, the strings get bigger and louder until we're there, basically. So now we've got everything together, we've established, we've built up, this is us coming out and being the strong, finished product that we now are. We've got some extra string layers in here, just supporting. They're all just kind of juxtaposed and working together, but they're all in there, and they build up again over like a 16 bar. Then they drop out and then they come back in for the end as well. So yeah, everything works together. All of that sits on top of the bass. The drums control lots of the elements to make sure they cut through. And then the vocal sits on top of the whole lot. Now, how do I like control and get all that balance and have it so that, you know, each element sounds great on its own, and then each bus sounds great when it's all combined, and then each layer works together? The trick's a load of automation, essentially. Having it so key moments, certain things stand out. If I press A in Logic, press A again, we'll see we've got a whole host of different automation lines, like key vocal parts here, for example, just being lifted up just for a minute into their bus. Vocals adjusting, and again, like depending on what they're being pushed to. So I've got like the send going to reverbs and things like that. I've got the vocal bus being automated down the bottom here as well. Just have a listen to what does this do here, for example. There you go, it's just been pushed into the echo, going, just in that little gap. Lots of little bits like that working together. It's just essentially how we build it all up. Things like here, like fading out. Taking it away from its wide bus. I'm pretty sure, yeah, there's different automation in the latter part for Monarch, but this part here, you know, this has got some key automations to help it stand out in key moments. Now that wasn't needed later, but I've got this instead, just lifting it up in this key section here. Just giving it its own little boost. Yeah, and that wasn't needed because we've got all those extra string layers in there. They didn't need to fight each other like they did previously. Whereas here, we're going to take it back. Got this following the back of the vocal. Sounds a bit weird on its own, but when it's all in there. And that, guys, is the breakdown of how I wrote and put together the track Light Me Up. If you'd like to see how I mastered it, so the final file that went out for release, watch this video next and I'll show you the whole process for that as well. Thank you very much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the mastering video.